Site survey tools are great to design a network and survey the area so you know where access points are going to be. Once you have done the site survey, you may need some other tools to understand how the RF environment is working. This is also something we recommend doing when you do a site survey as well. And there are a few different tools. Most of the time they are called the layer 1 type of tools. Let's say tools that do not only look at the 802.11 part of things, but also at the RF side of things, regardless of if it's an 802.11 transmitter or something else. There are a few tools of that type. One very common family of tool in the RF layer 1 tool family is MetaGeek Channelizer, which also continues the work done by Cisco Spectrum experts. Those two tools aim at using the traffic coming from an access point, a Cisco access point that has a cleaner chipset, and we'll come back on that cleaner chipset in a while, and use that RF information to display the air. We saw a demo in a previous lesson. We'll come back on that in a second. There are also some other tools that do the same type of traffic and analysis. One of them is Ekao Spectrum Analyzer. Some other tools like Cisco Meraki also has some capability to display the RF environment. And this is something you can see directly from the Meraki dashboard if you have a Meraki access point system. Some other professional tools, like for example AirMagnet, also have a spectrum analyzer type of functionality. So let's have a quick look at what you can see with Channelizer or Cisco Spectrum Expert. In a previous lesson, we saw a demo of Cisco Spectrum Expert. Remember that demo where you see these weird waves all across the spectrum? That was Cisco Spectrum Expert. Cisco Spectrum Experts used to have PCMCIA cards that they don't manufacture anymore, but the tool is still out there and you can still connect it to an access point that would be used as a card somehow. They also partner with MetaGeek, which makes the Channelizer software. And the same way as you do with Cisco Spectrum Experts, you can connect that Channelizer to an access point that you use as your card. So this is what I'm doing here on this controller, where I'm taking one access point and I'm going to change its mode, its behavior from normal mode, local mode, to what we call SE Connect, Spectrum Expert Connect. Once the AP is in that mode, it's going to behave as a scanner. So if I open Channelizer like I do here, I can then tell the tool, just like I would in Cisco Spectrum Experts, that I want to connect to an access point that I want to use as a remote card and see the RF environment around the access point. So I go here, click Connect to the access point, provide information about the access point IP address, and there's also something that we call the NSI key, which is a secret key that you need to have as an admin to the controller and input into the tool so that we know that you are allowed to see that information. Otherwise anybody could be connecting to your access points and looking at what's going on. So you need to be an admin on the controller to have that key, and you need to input that key into the tool, Spectrum Expert or Channelizer. Once you have that, you connect to the access point, and then from the tool, you have a live feed that shows you the air as the access point is seeing it. So you see the view is slightly different from what you saw in Cisco Spectrum Experts, but the logic is the same. You have on one side the channels. Here you see 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. And then here on the left side, you see a live feed of the RF energy that is being detected in all these different channels. And on the top, you can see the activity on those channels. So you see the view is slightly different, but logic is the same. The purpose is not to see the 802.11 traffic, the 802.11 activity, but have a raw view of what kind of RF energy you're detecting in any of those channels you're working on. This is of course very useful once you're troubleshooting some issue to see if there is a non-802.11 source of interference that would be damaging your signal in some of those channels. But it's also very useful when you do a site survey, because you want to be on site, detect the RF environment, and see if there is anything that could be a problem for your deployment. So in that tool, just like in Cisco or Spectrum Experts, there are many options that you can use to try to fine-tune what kind of view you want to have. For example, here I'm switching entirely to the 2.4 gigahertz band, so I only have a view of that band and also have a better accuracy of what kind of activity I see in that band. And you probably see on the right side 3 access points with that shape, which is typical now, as you know, of DSSS, that round circular shape. So there are 3 IPs here, and they are sending beacons at 1 megabit per second, probably. At least they're using DSSS, that's for sure. Once you know what's going on, you can always report about the conditions as you observe them, and that's going to be useful for you if you make some recommendations about what should be done or should not be done in an area where you plan on deploying some Wi-Fi network. Channelizer and Cisco Spectrum experts need an access point to work from if you don't have an adapter. And then, of course, the software itself installs on the laptop. If you use a Cisco Meraki cloud system, you can also turn some of your APs into scanners, and you can see what's going on in the air. So here, I'm in one of my access points in a smaller deployment, which is a home deployment, and I have a live view here of what's going on in the air in this area. So what is interesting is that the AP is still providing coverage and service, but at the same point, it gives me a view of what type of RF activity I can be seeing in those different channels. I can have a live view here, which cumulates the activity on each of the frequency that is being scanned, and then here have a more historical view of what type of traffic has been detected, what kind of energy has been detected. I can do the same for all my APs one by one, and also switch to 5 GHz if I want to. So this is very handy, but it requires specific access points, of course, and they need to be a Cisco Meraki. If you have an on-site deployment, that's where you would choose Cisco Spectrum Experts or Channelizer with access points that you have already on site. Layer 1 RF tools are very powerful, but you don't always need that. You don't need to see the RF view of the network. What you need to do sometimes is simply see what type of 802.11 activity you may see in any given environment. So there are plenty of easy tools, most of them are free, that you can use to simply list the number of access points that may be around, what kind of channels they're on, what kind of SSID names they display, what kind of security they have, etc. So there are plenty of those. Some examples include Insider or Acrylic, and those work on Windows. And there are some others that can work on some other operating system. For example, Android and Apple iOS have plenty of utilities that will allow you to have the same type of view. So for example, let's see what you have in Insider. In this Insider view, I have a live view of my network. So if I'm just trying to detect the existing environment, this is more than enough, right? At the bottom, I see my channels. I see which ones are being used, which ones are OFDM, and you see those because they have this flat top, which ones are DSSS, and you see them because they have this sort of curvy shape. And you see the same for the 5 GHz band. You see which channels are being used and which channels are not being used. You can also select the access points in the upper left here and see for each of them what is the SSID name, what kind of signal strength you see from your laptop, and even the channel and some security information that is present in the beacon. And if you select one of the access points, you can also see on the right what kind of channel power level you are detecting from your laptop. This is very useful if you move around and you try to locate the access points. Okay, so that doesn't give you a mapping type of feature like a site survey tool would. But if you're just trying to assess what kind of Wi-Fi is around there, this tool is more than enough to have a good idea of where the access points are, what kind of access points you can see, and what kind of capabilities they have. This will in turn give you information about what space is left if you want to deploy some other access points, or if you're trying to troubleshoot some issues, you may see some channels where you have too many APs and you may be thinking that maybe that's the reason why you have some issues. So for a basic detection of the RF environment as in 802.11, this is more than enough. Of course, if there is non-802.11 activity, this type of tool is not going to display that, but they are not made for it. So where are we? We have seen the site survey tools, planning ones and the ones we use on sites. For predictive site survey, we have 3 types, remember? And on site as well, we have the active and the passive types. And then we said beyond site survey, there are some tools which allow you to understand the RF conditions and the 802.11 network. So we saw the layer 1 tools that allow you to have a raw view of the RF environments. And then some more basic but very useful tools to have a layer 2 view of the network, what kind of SSIDs you can see out there, what channels, etc. There is the last type of tool that you're missing in your belt. That's a tool that allows you to actually capture packets and see what is going to happen in your network based on the traffic you see. See the speeds, see the frames. So those are also 802.11 tools, and we call them layer 2 tools. So they capture 802.11 and everything above, of course, and you can see what happens. There are quite a few tools of that type. The 2 major brands that you may need to be aware of course, Cevius OmniPeak, and this is a very professional tool that allows you to see an enormous amount of things about what's going on in your network. And the second one, because it's very famous and also because it's free, is Wireshark. So this is a generic tool that allows you to capture many things, including 802.11. For these two tools, you need to be able to bring a laptop in a position to capture layer 2 and up and bring it to the operating software where you have this application reading those information. And in most cases, if you're running, for example, Windows, there is no native way for the card to be able to take layer 2 information like management frames and bring that information up the stack. So in most cases, when you use those tools, you need to have a specific adapter which has a specific driver that is designed specifically to be able to capture and forward this information all the way up the stack to the application. So OmniPeak, for example, they designed their own adapter that you can use with their application on Windows. Wireshark also has their own adapter, which is actually not made by Wireshark, but which is made by a company that is compatible with Wireshark and you can use under Windows. If you use a Mac, in some cases, depending on which version you're using of the operating system, you can capture directly from the card. But in both cases, you have to bring your application to a state where it can read that information and be in what we call the promiscuous mode or the monitor mode, so that the layer 2 information that is being seen at the card can be brought up to the application. But once you do that, there is a clear view of what frames are being exchanged, and that gives you a rich view of what happens in your network. So let's have a brief look at these two tools. This is Wireshark, for example, and this is a capture I did a few days ago. And you see the great strength is that you see broadcast frames. This is a beacon, so it's a pure 802.11 frame that my station received, and unless I had this specific driver on my card, would have no reason to bring up to layer 7 so I could see it. But it's very useful because you can see everything which is inside the beacon, and to learn Wi-Fi, I tell you, this is very useful. The thing about Wireshark is that it's a free tool, so there are a lot of people working to make it better every single day, and it's very flexible and very powerful. However, it is not purely Wi-Fi, so it has many functions which have nothing to do with Wi-Fi networks. But if you have the possibility to get an adapter that is compatible with Wireshark, this is a great way to learn what happens in Wi-Fi, because you can see the exchanges, you can see the frames, you can see how they are built, you can see the speed at which they are built, you can see the signal, frequency, and the details of everything that is being exchanged over the air. The great strength as well is that you can use filters. You can just right-click anything and use it as a filter to either only see the same type of frames or apply as a new column if you want to display additional information about the exchange that helps you understand what happens. So Wireshark is a very, very powerful tool. It is not specifically wireless, but it's a great way to learn and capture traffic to understand what happens when things go wrong. OmniPeak is another major tool of the same kind. From the exterior, it looks like exactly like Wireshark because you have the same frames being captured, etc. The difference is that OmniPeak is designed specifically for Wi-Fi. So it has a few things which are making it different from Wireshark. One is that you can have some tools which are specifically Wi-Fi oriented to directly, in one click, hide all the beacons, for example, only see the management frames, for example, only see 11N, etc. So you have many shortcuts to only display the frames of interest. You can do the same with Wireshark, but it takes you longer because you have to define filters. The other thing that OmniPeak has is all sorts of dashboards that allow you to see in one glimpse what happened during your capture. You can see, for example, here the traffic. You can see what kind of activity you saw when you capture. You can see the speed. You can, if you have some voice and video, see what type of traffic you had. And here it's only a data network I did, etc. So you have a lot of dashboards that can be used to have a clear view of what type of activity you detected during your capture. Can you see the same with Wireshark? Well, you can design some filters that allow you to eventually get the same type of information. One strength of OmniPeak is that it's right there, so it's very handy when you want to work with a specific issue. You can see right from those dashboards maybe what's going on without having to go into the packet detail. The downside of OmniPeak, of course, is that it's not free. Wireshark is free, OmniPeak is not. So if you have the luxury of working in wireless, OmniPeak is a great tool to own. However, because of its price, many people use Wireshark and resort to using filters to display the same type of activity. In any case, a layer 2 tool is something critical to have in your belt to be able to capture packets, because whenever you have to design a network, this may not be very useful. But when you have to troubleshoot, it's critical to be able to capture the frames and understand from the exchangers, the speeds, and the contents what happened or what did not happen.